Hey, my name's Chris. This is Spiritual Wondering, a community for spiritual directors, companions, and coaches. This video is part of a series that is intended to give you some ideas for how you might start sessions. This video in particular is going to introduce you to one way that you might start a session that brings some imagery and metaphor into the very beginning of the session, and then that tool can be used for the rest of the session. This idea comes from a book called Spiritual Conversations with Children. It's by Lacy Borgo. But I want to tell you, it's not just for kids. It is so powerful. I've been using this in sessions with adults for years now, and it's super effective. She introduces this idea called listening stones. And I didn't use stones to make them. You can't buy these. You have to make them. But you can find on her website the images, which is what I did. I found the images that she had on the website. I just drew them on these little boards that I had. And it's this group of symbols, right? That the way I'll start a session is I start every session with something that can kind of help people feel centered and grounded. And I'll usually ask them, hey, is there a particular way that you would like to start the session? In case they have a practice that they're bringing in that is really important to them. But a lot of times they'll say, dealer's choice, whatever you want to do. And so I'll ask them, I'll be like, hey, will you just let's start off with a few breaths. Let's take some breaths together. And I might guide those, or I might just take a few breaths. Once we've had 2 or 3 breaths and the space feels calm, I'll hand them this. I've got them in a basket. And I'll hand them this basket. And I'll say, I want you to go through, and I want you to look through each of these symbols. And I want you to pick anywhere from 1 to 3 that resonate or speak to something about what's coming up for you or what's going on in your life. And they'll go through and they might choose some, and I'll pick a couple at random and kind of give you an example. So maybe a lot of times they'll pick them and they kind of lay them out in front of them, and I'll encourage them, take the rest and put it in the basket. And that way we can just look at these 3, the 1 to 3 that you've picked out that are resonating with you. And then I want you to tell me about them. And so, the random ones I picked out here. So this one, to me, it kind of looks like a tree. And so maybe they would say, I've been doing a lot of gardening, and, I'm just noticing that I really enjoy it. It feels really centering. It's okay. In my head, I'm tucking that away. I'm thinking maybe that'll come up. That gives me some themes around growth and slowness. Are they moving slowly? Are they taking time to enjoy nature? Is nature a place where they encounter God? I'm tucking all of these kind of thoughts away to think, because this imagery can be so rich. And so, maybe one of the others they pick is this frowny face, right? To me, this one looks like a frowny face or maybe an I don't know, I'm not sure how I feel. And I'm going to go with that and say, the rest of my life is kind of feeling ho-hum. And maybe that's what they talk about that. And that's rich too. To have this symbol of the ho-hum, it's oh, but you're encountering something special in this nature space. And so now these 2 symbols can start to play with each other. And maybe the third one they picked here is the question mark. And maybe the question mark is mystery or something like that. And so I'll have them explain all 3, and I might ask questions about them. So maybe the question mark, I'll say something like, oh, you said that, you have lots of questions. How's that showing up? How are you praying about that? What's happening in your prayer life with your questions? But I'll let them kind of go through all 3, and I'll ask questions for details. And then at the end, I may go in deeper to something that came up, like I would with spiritual direction. When something comes up, you ask questions, and that can take over the whole conversation sometimes, and that's okay. I go into this exercise with open hands to just say, whatever happens, that's what God is doing in that moment, and I'm okay with that. But if nothing's resonating for me as they've gone through all 3, I'll then say, okay, well, what is it that you want to talk about today? What would you like to focus on? Or I might even, to give them something, I might say, why don't you pick one of these symbols and tell me about what you want to talk about through the lens of this symbol. So there's all kinds of neat ways that you might use it. I hope that you can bring this into your sessions. I'd love to answer questions. I really enjoy these. It would be kind of neat to do this with someone. Videotape it. I can't do that with my clients, just like you couldn't do that with your clients. But if there's a listener or somebody listens to this and is like, oh, I'm really interested in seeing this, I would like to do this with you on camera, and then we can show other people what this looks like, and maybe that will encourage even more people to bring this into their sessions, and maybe it will serve you in the same way that it has served me. I hope you enjoy. I hope this brings something valuable into your practice, or maybe even sparks an entirely different idea. And I strongly encourage, I know that this book with the title, Spiritual Conversations with Children, people potentially hear that and they think this isn't for me because I'm not doing spiritual direction with children. Everything in this book you can use with adults, because really all that's happening in spiritual direction with children is we're using symbols, we're using imagery, art, other activities like that to try to get little people who don't have the language to talk about their experience with God. These images give them a way to talk about God. And we find out that they have these amazing, children have these amazing spiritual experiences and encounters that we never get to hear about because they don't have the language, and we don't use symbols and things like that often enough. Well, interestingly, many adults, I might go so far as to say all of us, like none of us really have the words to talk about God. It's kind of like that Taoist idea. The Tao that you can name is not the real Tao. The God that you can name is not the real God. It's the same kind of idea. Like, we don't have the words. We can't have the words to talk about these experiences that we have with the divine. And so these exercises that Lacy Borgo puts out are incredible for helping us find a way to communicate the things that we otherwise can't say. So enjoy.